I didn't mean to push the button. I'm not quite ready yet, but let's go for it. Wow. Okay, Governor DeSantis of Florida shipping off illegals that have been allowed and actually sent to his state. And then the fact that he sends them on to Martha's Vineyard. Classic move. A lot of the left-leaning would say that he's using these people as pawns, but it originally started with the globalists who really are controlling this situation, in my opinion, to cause chaos, discontent, overwhelming situation at the southern border in particular. And, you know, I talked about this once before, but when I was a mission president in the Salt Lake City West Mission, we had this particular Polynesian sister, and she came from Tonga, and she wanted to stay here after her mission because her grandmother lived here. And if you have been around Polys, you know that and I say Polys, it's an endearing term for me. I fell in love with our Polynesian people that we serve with, both missionaries and members and leadership. They're the most genuine, kind-hearted, non-caring about material things, share with everybody, feed you like nobody's business, respectful, kind. And so we had Marshallese, Tongan, Samoan. We had two steaks of Tongan, two Tongan steaks, several Samoan wards. The Samoans, they didn't have a steak in particular, which I thought was always interesting. I think the Tongans had some pull with President Monson at the time and were able to get their own steak. The Marshallese, it was a branch that grew so much that it became a ward just as we were released. It was really awesome. So the Polynesians, Hawaiians as well, the Polys. So this particular sister wanted to stay with auntie or grandma, you know, they're all related. And who knows if it's like, but that's what she said. So I called the mission department and they immediately said, no, there's no way, you can't do that. And because I'd already kind of started the process to do that, release her here, have her released. I don't do that, but stake president and kind of talk to grandmother, you know, and just to find out if everything was legit. And I got worked over by the mission department. And then I said this is just the horrible thing. I said, now look, let me get this straight. So we have missionaries that are here illegally, which is true. You could say they're DACA or whatever, and you're okay with that. They can serve here, but a Polynesian missionary can't stay here after their mission and work out their details, you know? So they're here illegally. You know, I thought I was actually kind of being a little progressive, you know, like, yeah, I don't care, you know, borders, smorters, you know? I got just reamed for saying the phrase illegal people, you know, they're here illegally or just the word illegally. And they said, you have to use the word non-documented. And I just said to the guy, he wasn't an ecclesiastical leader, had no priesthood keys over me. I told him to pound sand. I said, I'll call it the way it is. And they're here illegally, so they're illegals. You know, that's just the way it is. Now look, a lot of times I don't really care. I know that might surprise some of you. I'm not for, you know, at all costs defending the border. Sometimes I go, to heck with it, you know. But if the laws are the laws and they're here illegally, then they're breaking the law. I mean, that's just so simple. And so the federal government will not enforce. It's a catch and release, and they release them, not sending them back to their own country where they came from, but releasing them into our country to just do whatever. And then quite often, the federal government in the middle of the night will send these illegal, and most of them are young males. The federal government will move them around, but they'll move them to, not Martha's Vineyard. They'll move them to other places, or Washington, D.C., they won't do that. So these governors are like being inundated, and it's being caused by what the federal government is now doing with the catch and release. And so they're to send a message, but to also, it's a small amount, but hey, let's spread the joy around. So now to equate it to the church, which I like to always do, I've mentioned this before, but I've sat in meetings. I've been there. I've heard it. I've seen it. Not somebody told me, and I was there when high officials in the church, in the presidency of the 70, say, hey, we want to just allow these people to come in and da-da-da. And this is the Lord's way of doing baptisms, to spreading the gospel, is to have them just come in. And then I would bring up, well, my experience is actually presiding over West Valley, which had a high concentration. We had almost 30 Spanish units in our mission boundaries. Spanish-speaking units, by a unit that'd either be a branch or a ward. Most of them were wards. We had way more Spanish units than any other mission in Utah. And so a large focus of this was towards our mission, and that's why I was invited to all the meetings. And then that's when I would say, it doesn't make sense. We have the article of faith, that we should be obeying and being subject to the laws and obeying the laws. And also, it's not fair to those folks coming in here illegally. They're always looking over their shoulder. They usually have less than I won't say minimum wage, but not the greatest jobs. And so quite often they're working 2 and sometimes 3 jobs just to keep their head above water. But this was all in the guise of, we're all for it. And in one time, this individual said, and this was during the Trump administration, the beginning where, Trump was, we're going to build the wall, and who's going to pay for it? Mexico. Remember that? Well, he just poo-pooed that openly and actually came to our mission and said it to all of our missionaries. And he said, that's not going to happen. That's a ridiculous idea. And, everyone's welcome to come here. So I used to think in my mind, my crazy mind, I think, well, I know for a fact that this guy had 3 residences. 2 were his homes, the primary home, a secondary really nice home, and then he had a place in downtown Salt Lake to stay, which is great. He's a busy guy, I get it. But I thought to myself, actually, I think he might have had 3 I think he had 4, 3 for sure, but possibly 4 residents, places to hang his hat. And I thought, if people in his situation, he and his wife, both of them, are in that situation and they're really preaching this, they should be opening up their homes for these non-documented individuals that the Lord is sending here to get baptized. I know that sounds a little like naive maybe, or I'm just trying to, stir the pot. But I did think that. So when I hear of DeSantis or Governor Abbott of Texas, when I hear of them doing this, I go, yeah, I get it. It makes sense. Because it's these sanctuary cities and states that say, yes, we're all for it, until you actually bring them here. You know how long those, I think it was 50 individuals lasted in Martha's Vineyard? One day. And then they shipped them out. So it's all talk. I look at people as to what they actually do. Now, as our little granddaughter has gone through some things, and I've made it public on here, I don't even know how to respond to the kindness that's been shown to us, and the prayers, sending things. They are so meaningful, and I know that many of the people that have sent items or money, I know that many of them don't have a lot. And so this is huge. They are putting their money where their mouth is. Now, there's been some miracles happen, and I don't even know if I'm supposed to share this or not, but my daughter and her husband applied for some assistance, like the initial medical bills on all this, $160,000, thereabouts. I mean, that just, they have a Christian health share that they've been on for quite some time. We're actually on the same one. After our mission finished, we found this Christian health share, and it's a little tricky. Sometimes they're in network and sometimes they're not. And if they're not, you have to pay it up front and then submit. They're not. They don't have a lot of means right now to, and it can just be overwhelming. It can just be overwhelming. Well, they applied for some assistance. And they'd applied before, and everything had been turned down. And one of the reasons turned down, I don't want to reveal everything about my family and my daughter and her husband, but he's a dentist, and so you go, with student loans, borrowing to start up a practice, your debt ratio is pretty high, right? Still, these student debts and everything, and unlike some, they're paying. And one thing that when applying for certain assistance is they look at your income, but they don't consider any debt ratio, which I get, I understand, I understand. But in their particular case, it's like, they live in a very, very humble home in a humble area, and old car. I mean, like we started out. There's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying. I'm glad they're doing this. But the good news is that one of the places they applied for, and to be honest, I don't know what entity that is. They said, yes, we'll absolutely cover. And I'm not making this up, but the money that was donated to them through GoFundMe basically covers the whole amount of what they owe compared to what the assistance is going to pay. I mean, now we don't know what's going to happen onward, but I'm just saying, there are people that put their money where their mouth is, or they do this. They live who they are. Now, folks, I don't know how to even thank you. I almost feel like saying, don't send any more. But then again, I don't want to stop you, but don't feel like you need to. It's just been overwhelming. So when I see these leftists who talk and talk and talk and talk, but when it comes to right down to doing something and they don't do anything of what they preach, in fact, they do just the opposite, they just go hypocrite, hypocrite, hypocrite. So God bless those that aren't. And I hope I can not be a jerk and do that myself, you know. I'm not the greatest at it, I'll admit. I'm not the greatest at serving and thinking of others. That's why I have Sue. She feels it, she sees it, she identifies, and then I go, oh yeah, that's a good idea. Didn't even think of that. You know, I don't know, this marriage deal is awesome because, like, and I'm not trying to belittle myself either, and you know, demean myself. I don't mean to come off that way. It's just not my nature to think of that all the time, or to even, you know, like, yeah, sucks for them. Well, let's go watch the game, you know. I don't do that all the time, but I'm just trying to be, you know, honest and transparent here. It could be my nature. There's a possibility that I could have done that a time or two. And then to have this voice, which occasionally it's the Holy Ghost, but usually it's Sue, and I consider them almost one and the same. She'll say, you know, we really ought to, you know, do that. I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. Wish I would have thought of that. So anyway, God bless you. Just amazing. And that visit we had with Dennis, and if you go on that video, I'm serious. I had just barely met him, just heard his story briefly, and I just went, I've got to talk to this guy. It's just that this spirit. Well, his wife has made a comment. I've made a comment. Sue made a comment. Dennis made a comment on that video. So you can go on and see. I've got to see these folks again. I got to go to New York and see him. So hopefully that'll happen. Okay, so just a couple of thoughts. We've all been studying Isaiah. What can you say? There's so much stuff here. Now, this one gets a little graphic, but this is, to me, I will be changed forever. When I think of Isaiah, I'll think of this particular passage, because he is the most plain speaking, forthright, and paints a picture that it's really hard to unsee it after you've seen it. So this is in chapter 30 of Isaiah. And the heading for this is Israel scattered for rejecting her seers and prophets. I think this is good. She shall be gathered and blessed temporally and spiritually. The Lord shall come in a day of apostasy. Hello. That's when the Savior is going to come, when there's apostasy abounding, to judge and destroy the wicked. Okay, so very good. So I'm going to start in verse 19. For the people shall dwell in Zion at Jerusalem. Now, saints, Latter-day Saints struggle with this because they want everything to be about Jackson County, independence, the New Jerusalem. And so this verse, I'm sure they're like, well, and we have the double meaning all the time, which I'm all on board with. But let's take it for what it says, right? For the people shall dwell in Zion at Jerusalem. Thou shalt weep no more. He will be very gracious unto thee at the voice of thy cry. When he shall hear it, he will answer thee. What promises to the children of Israel. And though the Lord give you the bread of adversity and the water of affliction. It reminds me of Joseph in Liberty Jail. You know, it's so ironic that we have the word liberty attached to a jail, but in all reality, that's where Joseph was liberated, in the sense that he saw the big picture after much affliction, much adversity, and much affliction. So he definitely had the bread of adversity and the water of affliction. It's what we have to have to temper us into a fine steel. Okay. Yet shall not thy teachers be removed into a corner any more, but thine eyes shall see thy teachers, and thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, and this, at first when I heard that, hear the word behind thee, I was like, who's that talking about? It's talking about God. So it's like, I'm not going to be right in your face, but I'm going to be behind you, telling you. And thine ears shall hear a word behind thee, saying, this is the way, walk ye in it. It's the Spirit. When ye turn to the right hand, and when ye turn to the left. And then ye shall defile also the covering of thy graven images of silver. Now this is all about repentance. This is all about repentance, because it's turning the way the Spirit is telling you to turn. This is so good. And when I say you, I mean me. Us. Okay? But this is so good. And I apologize in advance, but not really. And ye shall defile also the covering of thy graven images of silver, and ornament of thy molten images of gold. Thou shalt cast them away as a menstruous cloth. Did you get that? Thou shalt say unto it, get thee hence. This is how we repent, folks. This is the one of the best visuals. So when we're talking about a menstruous cloth, now look, we all know what that is. And it's not Isaiah is making a point here that when we have sins, particularly when we're worshiping something other than God, when we're actually worshiping something, we, in order to listen from behind and listen to that Spirit tell us, when we hear that, we need to, the covering of thy graven images and the ornament of molten images of gold, thou shalt cast them away as a menstruous cloth. We need to discard that thing, cover it up, bag it, bury it, and get rid of it. Right? This is Isaiah. This is as plain speaking as you can be. Now, we could say, well, back in those days, this was probably appropriate to say. I doubt it. I think he was so adamant, and the Lord was revealing to him so adamantly to turn away from false gods and discard them as a menstruous cloth. I think he was pushing the envelope a little bit, and it still is. And I just had to give a shout out. You guys have read this, you've studied it, you've listened to Come Follow Me's that cover it. What's the guy's name? Avram. It's an Italian name. Escapes me right now. He's amazing with Isaiah. I don't want to, I shouldn't say compete, but I'm not a Come Follow Me guy. I read, I study, I have a few things pop out at me, and I like to express them. So that's the one that I wanted to bring out. Of course, I would go there, right? The Menstrous cloth. I would go there. A lot of just amazing things. Okay, now the last thing I wanted to talk about was this article in the latest Liahona. It's called The Everlasting Covenant. And it's kind of a repeat of one that President Nelson did before, back, I think, in the 90s, then Elder Nelson. It's really good. I know I'm old school, and I get this. Really good article on the Abrahamic covenant. But I thought there was a couple of things. Now, we've had some conversations on this channel, and you've heard us talk about that there's the time of the Gentile. When it winds down, that's the time of the Jews, and then that's really when things start. We really start looking forward to the second coming. Now, we have Rosh Hashanah coming up the end of September. There's a lot of things. There's a YouTube channel called Return of the King. George, can't remember his last name. This is George. And he talks about the alignments in the heavens that point to things, the Jewish holidays. To me, it's really interesting. He's all about the rapture. He's had some other predictions that didn't quite come out, but he acknowledges it and he comes forward. Return of the King is his YouTube channel, Return of the King. And hi, this is George of Return of the King. He's really good. He's actually quite amazing. But we have a lot of things that could be happening very soon. And as time approaches, my mind is always just, I don't force it. It just kind of happens. But I thought, isn't it interesting that we go from the Ensign, the name of the magazine, to the Liahona? This just popped into my head as I was reading this, and I'll point out a few other things here. Because the Ensign to the nations is really about Israel, Jerusalem. Okay? It's really about Jerusalem. In Isaiah. Now, we've talked about the double meanings, and I get that. And I don't argue with that. But isn't it interesting that it's almost like, no, we're not going to call it the Ensign magazine anymore, because that is really about the Jews. We're going to call it the Liahona, because that is our mission as the Gentiles, is to bring forth the Book of Mormon. And we're not Gentiles in one sense, but we're a Gentile nation, okay? The Book of Mormon came forth through a Gentile nation. And so because of that, it's going to be called the Liahona. And we're going to let the Ensign be, so it's kind of a pivotal move. I think it could be one of the indications of the time of the Gentile winding down and the time of the Jew or the Jewish conversion beginning to happen, or that Jews are recognizing Christ as the Messiah, the Messianic Jews and others. Okay, so here's one of the quotes, and I'll probably be butchering this word, but just bear with me. Once we make a covenant, I'm quoting from President Nelson here in this latest edition of the Liahona. Once we make a covenant with God, we leave neutral ground forever. God will not abandon his relationship with those who have forged such a bond with him. In fact, all those who have made a covenant with God have access to a special kind of love and mercy. We read about that in chapter 30. In the Hebrew language, the conventional love is called hesed. And then it has the Hebrew writing for it, hesed, H-E-S-E-D, hesed. Hesed has no adequate English equivalent. Translators of the King James Version of the Bible must have struggled with how to render Hesed in English. They often chose loving kindness. The captures, this captures much, but not all the meaning of Hesed. Other translations were also rendered, such as mercy and goodness. Hesed is a unique term describing a covenant relationship in which both parties are bound to be loyal and faithful to each other. Okay? And then it says, Hesed is a special kind of love and mercy that God feels for and extends to those who have made a covenant with him. And we reciprocate with Hesed for him. It goes both ways. Okay? Interesting. He's bringing in the Hebrew. He did that with, and he mentions that here with Israel's name, or Jacob's name being changed to Israel, and one of the definitions of Israel is let God prevail. It came from the wrestling match he had with Jehovah. And eventually Jacob gave in and let God prevail, and that became a definition. Okay, and he talks about that. Now, here's another word. The phrase peculiar treasure was translated from Hebrew segula. I don't know. Sounds like a dish, something to eat. But segula, meaning highly valued possession, a treasure. So as I'm reading this, I'm going, this is fascinating that our prophet today, President Nelson, quite often now is referring to Hebrew terms in his April 20, back then it was the ensign, April 20 ensign on the future of the church and preparing for the second coming of the Lord. He really made a shift towards recognizing Jerusalem, Israel, the country of Israel, that Christ will reign from there. You see a shift, I think, a pivotal shift in kind of leaving the typical America, promised land, and this is where it is, to, hey, this is what this means in Hebrew. We're understanding this. Jerusalem. Let's not call this the ensign anymore. Let's call it the Liahona, because that's what we're about. I'm just thinking out loud here, right? I remember, I don't think we've ever talked in person, but we've communicated by email or maybe text. But Jody Stoddard, and many of you remember Jody Stoddard. I haven't heard from her for quite some time. But I remember her receiving criticism for pointing out Jewish holidays, Jewish weddings. And to me, it was just fascinating, just the correlation. And really, a lot of us YouTubers really owe most of what we're doing to Jody Stoddard. And I'll tell you why. She's the one that went out on the limb, and she's also the one that took a lot of heat from people. And the criticism was, well, we've never heard that from a latter-day prophet, so why are you talking about that? That kind of thing. Why are you talking about Jewish weddings? What does that have to do with Mormons? What does that have to do with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints? We're going to Jackson County. And she took a lot of heat, not just for that, but some other things. And I don't know why. And I like I say, I don't know her personally. She's always been very kind to me. One time we had a disagreement, and I can't remember what it was about anymore. And we kind of bantered a little bit back and forth, but who cares? I really admire her, and I admire what she did early on in this, because she was pre-COVID, and then really, kind of stepped it up. But anyway, my point is now that the prophet has tied in, the Hebrew language, the meaning of words. He's tying in all kinds of things that have to do with Israel and Jerusalem. It's pretty amazing. Let's see, there was one other thing I was going to read here from this. Anyway, a shout out to Jody. She's awesome. Our calling as covenant Israel is to make sure every member of the church realizes the joy and privileges associated with making covenants with God. The thing that I thought was interesting there is calling us covenant Israel. And I've heard that before. Well, Israel, when you say Israel, that's referring to the northern kingdom. We're part of the lost tribes of Israel. Many of us, especially if you're from the blood or the loins or the lineage of Ephraim or Manasseh, but Ephraim is what most of us are. One of the sons of Joseph, adopted by Jacob or Israel, and then the northern kingdom is referred to as Israel. So when we're covenant Israel, and you can say, well, we're adopted because of the baptism. Well, that's not what my patriarchal blessing says. I'm sorry, it doesn't say that. So I think that's a really good indication that we are part of the lost tribes, and we have come in droves. And then if you add on to that, gathering Israel, not the Jews, but Israel, the northern kingdom. I'm just going to say the northern kingdom. Instead of gathering Israel, gathering the northern kingdom. Gathering the 10 tribes. Gathering the northern kingdom. I just lost my train of thought. Anyway, that gathering, on the other side of the veil, temple work, millions have been gathered. Okay, and just to reiterate again, the 12th article, or the 10th article of faith, the 10th article of faith, where we believe in the literal gathering of Israel and the return of the lost tribes, or something like that. And the proponents of a large group coming all at once would say, see, those are two separate events. And I say they are two separate events, but they have to return, or they have to be gathered and then return. So that's family history, because most of this stuff is done for those that have already passed. If you think that they just kind of are one group that just kind of stayed a group, they didn't have kids, or they're just still, they live in Shangri-La so they don't age, and they don't have kids because they can't keep populating, and they're just this group. That's what you almost have to think if they're coming as a group. But if you think of them as scattered, lived their lives, intermarried, whatever, got dispersed and moved around and died, that's who we are gathering. And then once they're gathered through family history and other things like that, then they return to the covenant. To the covenant, the very thing we're talking about here, the everlasting but the everlasting covenant. That's what they're returning to. So there's the gathering of them, but in order for them to return, they have to be gathered first. Okay? All right. Now, the one last thing I want to mention from this article that I thought was so good. Before I do that, one of his references for the Hesed word is Carrie Mulstein. Carrie Mulstein. You remember Troy Abels of the Last Dispensation YouTube channel. Troy invited me on when he interviewed Carrie Mulstein. Muhlestein, I'm sure. Professor at BYU. This guy's the best. He's so good. He's a humble guy, brilliant man of ancient scripture and Middle Eastern studies, all that. He's brilliant. And so it's so cool. I highlighted his name in because I always like to read the footnotes and read where we're getting some information here. And Carey, I think he's, we talk a lot of trash about BYU, and rightfully so, except for their football team. I don't allow that, but you can do it about many of the professors. But Carey's one of the good guys. And we ought to, as much as we talk about the negative things that happen at BYU, which are totally legit, there's some awesome things there, and Carey is one of those. Carey Muhlestein. He wrote a really small book on the book of Abraham, and I bought it and read it. It was awesome. It was really good. Okay, now the last part of this article, it says, and I started reading this, our calling as Covenant Israel is to make sure every member of the church realizes the joy and privileges associated with making covenants with God. Now the woke, okay, this is a warning to you woke folks in the church. This next sentence is going to be very offensive to you. It is a call to encourage every covenant-keeping man, woman, boy, and girl to share the gospel with those who come within their sphere of influence. I think that's really interesting that he goes man, woman, boy, girl, because you can't even say that anymore. Even our Governor Cox, my preferred pronouns are he, him, or whatever. What a goob. But anyway, yeah, man, woman, boy, girl. I think that was on purpose. Great article from a great man. So I love that. I think that's all on this video for right now. The dinner tonight that Sue made is unbelievable. It was kind of a repeat, but slightly changed from last night. But she made eggplant lasagna. Now, we grew the eggplant, guys. We did it. This thing was beautiful, purple thing. And her eggplant lasagna is to die for. And we had sausage, Italian sausage in it from a wild hog I shot. We had the eggplant from our garden. Bread and butter pickles from cucumbers from our garden. And it's a new recipe that Caitlin in Texas showed Sue. It's kind of a quick, and you just refrigerate it. You don't have to seal it. So you get one of those big half-gallon mason jars with the screw-on lid, the plastic lid, and you stick it in the refrigerator. And those bread and butter pickles with the onions and stuff, oh my goodness. And then some French bread. I'm telling you, I'm a happy man. Happy man. It was awesome. We have had a great harvest. Our garden got out of control. I'm not going to lie, while we were in Texas, but we were able to, and we still have stuff out there. We have some really cool pumpkins for the fall season, decoration and whatnot, and we'll obviously make some things, pumpkin pie and whatnot, but pumpkin pie, different squashes. Just some got a little out of control. I'm not gonna lie. Zucchinis, that you don't even know they're there, and then you go, holy smokes, got to get a wheelbarrow to move that thing. Anyway, it's been a great blessing. So the harvest right has been just running. I did scrambled eggs the other night. Well, I prepared them and they're done now. Salt and peppered them, everything. Cooked them and then put them on the trays. Boom. Our elderberries didn't turn out, so we dehydrated those. For some reason, maybe I put too many on on the sheet or something, but they didn't, so they didn't freeze dry. So we dehydrated those, which is what we've done before. There's the elderberries are weird, but they have a lot of good things in them, antioxidant type kind of thing. So we did that. We've done ground beef, tons of ground beef. We've done blackberries that we got from our neighbors. Freeze dried a whole bunch of those. We have blackberry bushes, but they're pretty new and they just haven't produced a whole lot yet. But hopefully next year they'll be good. I think I gotta prune them or trim them back or something. I don't know. I gotta YouTube blackberries and raspberries. Our raspberries were fair, but you know, we could do better. So I gotta figure that out. And we're really looking into getting a greenhouse. I'm not gonna build one. I think I'm gonna order one that's a good one, and it might be, you know, like February before we can get it. Everything's crazy, but I really want to grow lettuce and a few things so I can have fresh lettuce all throughout the year. I think that'd be really good, and other things, you know, and then get things kind of started. Because where we live, about 5,000 feet, you know, you get it's a little late to get things started, and then, you know, not this year. I mean, usually by now we've had a hard frost, but heck, man, it's been great. A little cooler, but it's been welcome. So yeah, I can't think of, gosh, we've done so many things in the harvest, right? But that thing's just going. It's almost like I don't hear it. It's like a crying baby at church. I don't even hear those anymore. Not those like they're just something, but I don't hear crying babies. I don't like it when I'm not hearing a crying baby, I guess. But it's just kind of like background. It's like, it's kind of nice. Kind of the hum of a diesel motor, you know, it's soothing. It's soothing. The hum of the harvest right is soothing. I like hearing it running out in the barn. So God bless. Thank you for everything. Go Cougs, and love you all. Talk to you soon. Bye.